On a cold night, as a light drizzle fell, the gas station lights illuminated the wet streets of Chicago. Michael Jordan, the legendary former basketball player, stopped to refuel his sports car. Everything seemed normal until he noticed something that made him pause. A young pregnant woman, visibly exhausted, was running back and forth, carrying heavy boxes and filling up car tanks. She barely had a moment to breathe. What Michael did next left everyone at the station speechless and completely changed that woman's day. You won't believe the impact of his gesture. Get ready to hear a heartwarming story that inspires hope. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The night in Chicago was calm, but it carried a subtle touch of melancholy. On a quiet street, a gas station flickered its red and blue neon lights against the wet asphalt. For most, it was just an ordinary place, but for Emily, that station meant survival. 7 months pregnant, Emily moved with determination between the fuel pumps, cleaning windshields and checking oil for the hurried customers' cars. Her thin jacket and worn-out work uniform offered little protection against the cold, but she couldn't afford to think about that. The paycheck from that night was crucial to cover another month of rent. Her 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, sat on a plastic chair under the station's canopy, shielded from the drizzle. Her tiny fingers gripped a worn-out red pencil while she carefully drew in an old activity book. Next to her were only 2 other pencils, equally short, a blue one and a yellow one. With so little, Sophia focused on filling the pages with drawings that seemed deeply meaningful to her. As Emily worked, a low hum echoed through the station. A black luxury car smoothly rolled up to one of the pumps. Michael Jordan, wearing a stylish coat and a discreet cap, stepped out of the vehicle with fluid movements. He removed his cap, revealing his head slightly damp from the rain, and surveyed the scene around him. His gaze paused on Emily for a moment. He noticed how efficiently she cleaned a windshield, keeping a polite smile for the customers despite her evident fatigue. His attention then shifted to Sophia, who was absorbed in her drawing, as if she were creating something important. Curious, Michael approached the child and looked at the drawing. It was a simple scene but detailed: a kitchen with steaming pots and pans, a table in the center, and what appeared to be a counter with an empty space. "Do you like to draw?" he asked gently. Sophia looked up, surprised by his presence, but nodded. "I draw places I want to go," she replied. Michael smiled. "And this place? What is it?" Sophia hesitated, looking at her drawing. She gripped the red pencil in her small hand, as if deciding what to say. Before she could respond, Emily appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sophia, don't bother the gentleman," she said with a polite smile. "She's not bothering me," Michael replied calmly. "In fact, I'm learning about her drawings and the places she wants to see." Emily gave a look that mixed curiosity and caution, but before she could say anything else, a car honked at the pump next door. "Excuse me," she said, turning to attend to the customer. Michael stood still for a moment, watching as Emily returned to her work. His eyes went back to Sophia and her unfinished sketch. Something in that moment felt larger than he could fully understand. He kept looking at the drawing as Sophia added a few more details. He didn't know why, but that simple piece of paper seemed to carry more than pencil strokes. It seemed to carry a dream, and he was about to discover what it meant. Emily cleaned the last windshield of the night, but her movements had slowed considerably. The weight of her pregnancy pressed against her lower back, sending waves of pain with every step. She tried to mask her discomfort, but every time she bent or stretched to reach the center of the glass, her face betrayed her exhaustion. When the last customer finally left, she leaned slightly against one of the pumps, trying to relieve the pressure on her back. Emily took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment to hold back tears. It wasn't just the physical pain. It was the emotional burden accumulated from nights like this. From a distance, Michael noticed it all, but he didn't approach immediately. He watched as Emily adjusted her uniform and forced a smile before heading back to the station's counter. Sophia, sitting in her worn-out plastic chair, looked up from her drawing pad and noticed her mother's discomfort. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked softly. "I'm fine, dear," Emily replied, forcing a smile as she sat next to her daughter. Michael, seeing the hesitation in Emily's response, finally stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said gently, trying not to startle her. "Do you need help with anything? You look tired." Emily looked at him, surprised, but her instinct was to refuse. "Thank you, but I'm fine. Just a little back pain. It's normal." "Normal pregnancy shouldn't mean constant pain," Michael Jordan responded calmly, his voice carrying a kindness that made Emily pause. She shook her head, looking down at the ground. "There's not much to be done. It's just part of life." Michael didn't press further, but he watched as she supported her lower back while sitting. He crouched down, keeping a respectful distance. "Do you do this every night?" Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "2 nights a week here, and in the morning I clean offices. It's what pays the rent and keeps Sophia." Michael was silent for a moment, processing what she had just shared. "And when do you rest?" he asked quietly. Emily let out a silent laugh, devoid of humor. "Rest? I really don't have time for that. Bills don't wait, and with the baby coming, I need to work even more. There's no choice." "It shouldn't be like this," Michael murmured. Emily looked at him directly for the first time. Her eyes were filled with exhaustion. "Maybe, but at least for me, this is how things happened. I made choices that got me here. I can't complain. Complaining doesn't help Sophia." Sophia, who had been listening in silence, placed her small hand over her mother's. "You do everything for me, Mom." Emily's expression softened, but tears welled up in her eyes. "Because you are everything that matters, Soph. You are the reason I keep going." Michael observed the exchange between mother and daughter, feeling a deep empathy for Emily. He realized that this woman not only carried the weight of pregnancy in exhausting shifts, but also the emotional burden of ensuring Sophia's safety and giving her a dignified life, even when it seemed impossible. Emily's voice trembled a bit as she continued. "Sometimes, I wonder if I'm doing enough. If one day Sophia will look back and think I just fought, but never really lived. That I never gave her something beautiful." Sophia squeezed her mother's hand. "You give me everything, Mom." Emily smiled, but a shadow passed over her eyes. Michael noticed that she was holding something deeper inside. "And what about her father?" he asked gently. Emily froze for a moment before answering. "He left when he found out I was pregnant again." Michael felt a knot tighten in his chest. He said he didn't want another responsibility, that it was already hard enough with one child. Emily continued, her voice wavering slightly. "Then he packed his things and left." Sophia looked at her mother with sad eyes, but didn't say anything. Emily squeezed her daughter's hand, trying to convey comfort. Michael hesitated before asking, "And you? What did you do after that?" Emily took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders with a strength that seemed rehearsed. "I kept going, because I had no choice." The sound of a car horn interrupted the conversation. Emily straightened up and turned. "Excuse me, sir." "Duty calls." Michael stood still, watching her walk away. He noticed a slight limp in her right foot, the weight of pregnancy evident in each movement. His gaze shifted to Sophia, who returned to her chair. The little girl was still holding a red pencil, but her eyes followed her mother with a concern that seemed far too big for her age. "Your mom works really hard," Michael commented, crouching down gently to be closer to the girl's level. Sophia nodded, gripping the red pencil tightly in her small fingers. "Sometimes she cries when she thinks I'm sleeping." Michael felt a pang in his chest. "Why?" "Because she's tired," Sophia said, hesitating. "And because, like Mom said, Daddy left when he found out about the baby. He said he didn't want another mouth to feed." Michael remained silent, the girl's words echoing inside him. He looked at Emily and knew, in that moment, that he had to do something. The struggle this woman faced, in the glimpse of hope still visible in Sophia's eyes, couldn't be ignored. Michael stood up beside Sophia, his mind racing. He didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was clear. What he was about to do would change everything for them. A light drizzle made the air colder and heavier. Emily adjusted the jacket over her shoulders, a shiver running through her already exhausted body. By her side, Sophia continued sketching another drawing, but Michael Jordan was watching the scene in front of him. The peaceful interaction between mother and daughter caught his attention. But what really held him was the stark contrast between Sophia's bright innocence and Emily's visible exhaustion, despite her efforts to hide it. He could see the physical and emotional cost of her struggles. After a moment of silence, Jordan decided to break it with a calm tone. "I'd like to ask you something." Emily, surprised, looked at him and gestured for him to continue. "If you had just one chance to do something differently, what would it be?" She hesitated. The question seemed simple, but the answer carried immense weight. She stared at the wet ground, and after a moment she answered, "I don't know. I guess I can't afford to think that way. There's no more room for what-ifs when you have bills to pay and kids to raise." Jordan nodded, understanding her resistance. "I imagine you've given up on a lot of things because of that." Emily furrowed her brow and sighed in response. "Give up isn't the right word. It's more like—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Like life just doesn't allow certain things. You can't dream when you're barely managing to pay rent." Sophia, who had been focused on her drawing until then, lifted her eyes and looked at her mother. "But you still cook, Mommy, and make the best lasagna in the world." Emily chuckled softly, a laugh tinged with sadness. "Making lasagna at home and running a restaurant are two very different things, sweetheart." Michael Jordan turned back to Emily, his expression firm but curious. "But you wanted a restaurant, didn't you?" She was silent for a moment. Then with a soft voice she replied, "Yes, when I was younger. Before all of this. Before Marco ... Jordan noticed the weight in her voice when she mentioned his name. Emily sighed, her gaze lost on the horizon. "When we got married, we dreamed of opening a restaurant together. He used to say I had a gift, that my love for food was special. But after Sophia was born, things got tough. And when I found out I was pregnant again, he just left." Sophia silently squeezed her mother's hand, offering comfort. Emily swallowed hard before continuing. "He said he couldn't handle another burden, that he didn't want another responsibility, and then he just walked away." Jordan felt a tight knot in his chest. He looked at Sophia, who was now drawing quietly, and then at Emily, who was trying to hold herself together. He straightened up, his expression serious. "Maybe you feel like you have no choice now, but what if you had help? What if there was a way to change that?" Emily furrowed her brow, clearly skeptical. "I appreciate it, but I don't need charity. I'm fine." "I'm not talking about charity," Jordan replied, his voice firm but gentle. "I'm talking about an opportunity, something that could help you dream again." Emily shook her head, visibly struggling with the words. "Why do you care?" "I'm nobody important." "Because everyone deserves the chance to dream," Jordan said calmly. "And because you deserve more than just surviving." His tone became resolute. "I'll be back tomorrow." Emily stared at him, unsure how to respond. "Why?" Jordan gave a small smile and subtly gestured to Sophia's notebook in the surroundings. "Because I think you deserve more." Then without another word, he turned and walked toward his motorcycle. Emily stood still, speechless. She didn't know what to make of the promise, but whatever he would bring the next day was something she could never have imagined. The next morning, Emily finished her shift at the gas station and was organizing her things behind the counter when she heard the familiar roar of an engine. She knew it wasn't a coincidence. Sophia, who had been sitting and drawing, stopped and looked toward the sound with curiosity. Jordan parked his motorcycle in the same spot as the night before. With a calm smile, he dismounted and held two large paper bags. He seemed relaxed, but Emily knew something big was about to happen. With the same determination as before, Michael Jordan approached Emily, greeting her with a quiet smile. "Good morning," he said as he placed the bags on the counter. Emily looked at him, still a bit cautious. "You really came back?" she asked. "I said I would," Michael replied simply and directly. He turned to Sophia. "Good morning, Sophia." "Good morning," Sophia replied enthusiastically. Her eyes were already fixed on the bags, curious about what they might contain. Noticing Emily's hesitation, Michael said, "I just want you to see what I brought." He opened the bags, revealing groceries, some new clothes for Sophia, and on top, a pristine box of colored pencils. Sophia was speechless, taking the box in her hands as if it were treasure. "Thank you, sir," she exclaimed, hugging the colored pencils lovingly. Emily watched her daughter's reaction. but her gaze was fixed on the items in the bags. She opened her mouth to speak, but Michael gently interrupted her. I know what you're thinking, but this isn't charity. It's just a little push to help you breathe a little easier. Emily shook her head, fighting back the emotion. I don't know if I can accept this. Michael placed an envelope on the counter. This is for the rent, just for this month. And there's one more thing. He handed her a slightly crumpled flyer. Emily took it and read the words carefully. Cooking course for single mothers. She blinked, confused. What is this? It's a free cooking course, Michael explained. It covers professional techniques and also offers help with the business side of things, in case you want to turn this into something bigger someday. Emily looked at the flyer and then back at Michael, clearly struggling to process what was happening. Why are you doing this? You don't even know us. Michael smiled slightly, but his expression remained serious, yet kind. Because you deserve it, and sometimes an act of kindness can change everything. Emily took a deep breath, trying to keep her tears in check. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything now, Michael replied. Just think about it and know that someone believes in you. Sophia, still clutching the pencils, looked at the flyer in her mother's hand. Mommy, are you going to learn new recipes like the ones Grandma used to make? Emily looked at her daughter and then at the flyer. Something seemed to have changed inside her, a small space of hope, no matter how faint. She held the flyer, looking at Sophia and then at Michael. Still hesitant, but with a newly discovered spark in her eyes, she whispered, Maybe it's time to try. Little did she know, what Michael had planned for the future would be even more transformative. Months passed since that morning. Emily joined the cooking course, not just to refine her skills, but to open doors she had never imagined. Each class made her rediscover her passion for cooking and, more importantly, her ability to bring people together. Michael kept his promise. During this time, he worked quietly on something bigger. He gathered contacts, sought support, and found a small, perfect space in the neighborhood. Simple, but welcoming. The ideal spot for what was to come. On a special morning, Emily and Sophia arrived at the place, unaware of what awaited them. Michael was there, with his calm, familiar smile, waiting for their arrival. What is this? Emily asked, her eyes scanning the storefront. Michael stepped aside and revealed a sign above the door, with elegant lettering. The name was there. La Cocina de Mama. Emily froze. The shock was evident on her face. She put her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back the tears that were already streaming down her cheeks. Sophia grabbed her mother's arm, her eyes shining with emotion. It's your restaurant, Mommy, she exclaimed, pulling her toward the door. Emily turned to Michael, incredulous. You did this? Michael smiled, keeping his tone serious but warm. Because you deserve it. Because your story and your talent are special and the world needs to see them. And because no one should give up on their dreams. They walked in together. The restaurant was simple, but perfect. Emily had everything she needed to start a functional and well-organized kitchen. Charts and thoughtful details, a reminder of her grandmother and the restaurant she had always dreamed of, inspired by the time spent in her childhood. Sophia ran to a corner where there was a small table set up for children to draw, equipped with the pencils Michael Jordan had given her months ago. Emily ran her fingers across the surfaces, still trying to absorb the reality of it all. She turned to Michael, searching for the right words. I don't know how to thank you for this, she said. Michael, with his calm smile, replied, You don't have to thank me. Just do what you do best. Cook, bring people together, and pass that kindness forward. The opening took place days later, and the restaurant quickly became a beloved gathering spot in the community. Emily prepared dishes that told stories, each one inspired by her grandmother's recipes, but with her own creative twists. The food was amazing, but what truly made the place special was the heart Emily put into every detail. On the night of the opening, Sophia sat at a table, proudly handing out menus she had drawn herself. Emily was in the kitchen, preparing lasagna, while the restaurant buzzed with laughter and conversation. Michael was sitting at a quiet table in the corner of the room observing it all. When Emily brought the lasagna to his table, She sat for a moment, smiling. "I never imagined I would be here," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. Michael looked around and said, "You deserve it. What you've created here is something everyone needs to experience." As Emily looked around the bustling restaurant, she realized that her dream was coming true. But the real transformation wasn't just in her own life. The ripple effect of that act of kindness on her community was just beginning. The aroma of freshly made food filled the air, enveloping the small restaurant in a warm embrace. Emily organized each dish with the passion and care she had always carried inside her. The tables were filled with smiling customers, sharing laughs and sincere conversations. The restaurant wasn't just a place to eat, but a space for connection, for shared stories, and for community. Sophia, with her ever-present coloring pencil in hand, moved between tables, handing out menus she had drawn, happily telling everyone that the restaurant was inspired by her family's beloved recipes. Michael sat at his quiet table, but unmistakably present, watching with a satisfied smile. He knew that the transformation he was witnessing went far beyond the movement of the room around him. Emily approached him with a cup of coffee. "You always sit at the same table," she joked. Michael smiled. "It's the best spot in the house. I can see everything." Emily sat across from him, looking around the restaurant. "I never could have imagined this would happen. Not a day goes by that I don't thank you for what you've done for me and Sophia. You changed everything." Michael shook his head softly. "Number? You changed everything. I just gave you a little push." She smiled back, but her expression turned serious. "I will never forget what you did for us, and I will make sure to pass it on." Michael nodded. "That's all I could ask for. Kindness is a cycle. Now you have the chance to be that change for someone else." At that moment, Sophia appeared at the table, holding her sketchbook. "Look what I drew!" Emily took the sketchbook and chuckled softly. It was a drawing of the restaurant, now complete, with customers, plates of food, and a large sign outside with the name Asterisco Lauscha Diona. "It's perfect," Emily said, pulling Sophia into a hug. Michael stood up, leaving some bills on the table. "I think it's time for me to go." Emily looked at him in surprise. "Why are you leaving?" "You're a part of this." "I always will be," he replied. "But this place is yours now. It's time for you to continue writing this story." He gave a warm smile to Sophia before heading for the door, leaving Emily deeply moved. As she watched Michael leave, she realized that her life hadn't just changed. She was ready to be the catalyst for someone else's transformation. What she would do next would become the next chapter in her story, a story of determination, courage, and the profound power of kindness. The message I hope to share through this story is simple but powerful. Never stop dreaming. Dreams are the flame that keeps hope alive within us, even in the toughest times. They give us purpose, direction, and something to fight for. And alongside dreams, kindness becomes the thread that connects us, a silent force that transforms lives, reminding us that no one is truly alone.